Hi, it's Deanna, and today I'm going to show you antique Victorian Imperial cabinet card photos. And these will take place between the 1870s and the 1890s. So let's begin. So the first one, we have this gentleman here. This is possibly 1890s. This one's interesting. The gentleman in the photograph is wearing a sash, and the sash appears to have stars and stripes, and it may be like an American flag sash. And this leads me to believe that this gentleman fought in the Civil War, and this was like a banner, like a commemorative banner, and maybe he belonged to a club, like a Civil War soldiers veterans club. So that's quite interesting, actually. Now this picture is probably an 1870s photograph, and it says Uncle Mike Mcmahan. And we have this gentleman here who has what's called mutton chops. And mutton chops was facial hair that extended from the jawline all the way up to the ear and went across into a mustache. And that was very interesting. And on the back it has a really nice graphic. So the photography studio had something very, very artistic for the time frame. And it's interesting to read the old literature on the back explaining about their company. Sorry for the glare on the counter here. I have skylights above me, and it casts like shadows all over the place. This is a nice vignette. It's probably 1880s or so, give or take a few years going back or forward. And we have some information written on the back. So this is 1888, which I like, it's dated. And it says, this was taken in 1888 when this gentleman was 17 years old. Let me try to focus. Very interesting. We have some info on the bottom. And on the back we have another nice logo. So let's read some of that information. Very, very unique. Here's probably an 1880s photograph. Give or take a few years going back or forward. And the back has nice gold gilded words and letters. And I think the gold gilding actually means this could be a late 1880s photograph, early 1890s. They usually gilded the back of those cards around then. There's another interesting photo. Probably late 1870s, 1880s. Now, I'm not an expert on old photographs, but and I can't be 100% sure of the decade that they were taken in, but I can get pretty close. So we have on the back here a really nice graphic. I'll zoom in and let you see it. Very unique. There's a picture of an old camera on a stand. This is probably an 1870s photograph. And as you saw the graphic on the earlier one, now you see this one is much more, actually, I'm wrong. See, I told you I wasn't an expert, that's for sure. This is dated 1889. And generally, what I was trying to explain to you was, see how the photographer's logo doesn't take up the whole back of the card and you can hardly see it. Actually, let me try to get my camera into better focus. See how it's faded? Generally, the earlier photos, like from 1870s, 1860s and earlier, didn't have it taking up the whole back of the card. So this one miffed me. And you see how easy it is to get tricked? But what can you do? As long as I don't have a date or a name, I can never tell. But then again, here's a dated card, 1889. And that helps me date the photograph. I really have an easier time of telling a photograph that was taken in the 1860s than I do of these cards that were taken in the decades of the 1870s, 1880s, and 90s. Especially gentlemen, it's hard to date the photographs with men in it because men weren't as fashionable as ladies. Ladies always wore like the latest fashions, and generally it changed from decade to decade. And with men, they always wore basically the same thing. Suits and ties, and that was traditional. And it really didn't change much over the decades, except for sometimes the suits got looser looking instead of more silhouetted and tighter. And their ties sometimes changed, or the collars of their shirts sometimes changed. But then again, men always wore things that basically were the same. And women, their fashions always changed, and they were more slaves to the latest fashions. So not being an expert on these old photos makes it harder for me to figure out when they were taken. And we have a date. So this one is dated September 21st, 1891. And so now we have a date for this. This has like a vignette in the center. And we have the name of the studio on the front and back. Interesting graphic and logo. And it has a date. So it has the guy's name here. CC, I can't really make out the last name. And it's June 1890. Here's another one. And it has the photographer's studio logo on the front. And it's of a young gentleman. And on the back we have a graphic that takes up the whole card for the photography studio. And it says instantaneous process used exclusively. And it shows you a bust of a lady. What looks like the Parthenon. It's like almost like classical Greek style. And it says special attention given to all kinds of portraiture. Crayon, ink, oil, or watercolor. And what they meant by that was they would touch it up and give it a little bit of a colored look for an extra cost. And apparently this person didn't pay the extra cost to get their cheeks tinted or the photo colorized in any way by hand. And this probably can date the photograph to about the 1890s, sometimes in the late 1890s. You see the scalloping that goes around the card? They started doing that then. And what's neat is it has almost like a 3D vignette in the center. As you can see, it's raised. And on the back we have an old graphic from the company that made the photo and the photography studio's logo. And that's interesting. So now here's what we have, a memorial card. And a memorial card was when somebody passed away, if he had gotten his photograph taken earlier at a different time, the family members and loved ones could ask the studio to make a card that basically memorialized him, and they can get copies. And you see how surrounding his photo, there's all sorts of flowers and ivy. That generally meant the person passed away, and the family members requested more copies and had it placed where it looked like a memorial going around the gentleman. And this has a really interesting graphic. You can see an old camera on the table here with an artist palette. And it says crayon work as a specialty. So again, crayon, they would colorize the photo, tint the cheeks. And this one, they didn't pay the extra to have that done because it was much more money. It was much more costly to do that. And we have the photographer's studio information on the bottom. And you see how this is simpler? This is what I meant before. Like the earlier photos would have just a simple logo on the back. But then again, it could throw you off because even it could still be an 1880s photo or later, and they just used a simple logo on the back. So you may never really know unless there's a date on the photograph. Or you can really date it by the clothing, whether the suit was loose fitting or tight fitting, the tie, and how the collar looked at the time. And we have the photographer's studio info on the bottom. And more of it on the back, and it took up the whole entire card. And this one has a really beautiful graphic. As you can see, it has a rampant lion in the background. It says instantaneous process, used exclusively. And it has really interesting, ornate flowers and scrolls going around the border of the card. And this has a gentleman in vignette in the center. And on the back, we have a simple logo. And I think it's from the same photographer as the photo we saw earlier. So we have this gentleman here. He has an interesting mustache and beard. And we have the photographer's logo on the bottom. And again, it takes up the whole back of the card. This was like an advertisement for them. It was like, basically, in other words, having your studio in an advertisement on the back of the card. So when the person that had their photographs taken handed out these photos and gave them away to family members and friends, or had relatives and friends come over the house to look at the photo album, when they flipped the card over, they saw the photographer's studio information. It was like a business card in a way. And I like old advertisements. They're quite fascinating to look at. And a lot of things have changed from then to now. Things aren't fancy like they used to be. This has a simple photography studio graphic on the front, and that's all. So if you're waiting for this video to end and you're hoping it ends soon, I promise you it's almost over. Thanks for sticking by me and tuning in. And no info on the back, but it's on the bottom. So here's an 1890s cabinet card. And I'll tell you why. You see the scallop, the fancy scalloping on the top of the card? That shows you that's probably 1890s or so. And this kept going past the decade of 1890, all the way into the early 20th century. And this is a raised panel in the center. It's almost coming out in 3D, as you can see here. And that's neat and interesting. On the back, we have a really nice graphic. It says Julius Hebels. and duplicates can be had at any time. You lied. This company lied. Imagine, hey, I need duplicates, like 120 years later. Not happening. And you have this gentleman here with a really nice mustache. And it says $1. So as you can see, that was a lot of money. This was a time when people only made 80 cents to $1 a day. So imagine paying a whole entire day's salary just to get a photo of yourself. When now we take it for granted. We snap thousands upon thousands of photographs on our iPhones or on our Android phones, and it doesn't really cost us a penny. So people had to spend a whole entire day's salary just to get a photograph of themselves, and that was quite a bit of money. And on the back we have this nice graphic. And this has an impressed logo. So it was like impressed into the card. And if you go around the border, see how it's more fancier than the other cards? And this is probably telling me this is 1890s or early 1900s. There's no info on the back. And on the back we have this large graphic. And again, it's saying that it was $1. One whole dollar for your photograph. Your whole day's salary down the toilet. I can't even imagine that now. What is that? Like if you're making minimum wage, like $60 to $80 a day? So these photos were like equivalent to like $50 to $60. And if you went to a cheaper photography studio that churned these out by the thousands, it would probably cost you like half a day's salary or a quarter of a day's salary. If you went to a better photography studio or got larger sized prints, you were going to pay $1 or a whole day's salary. So we're all done. You saw all these photographs. That was quite a bit. And I hope you enjoyed my video. Keep tuning in because I'm going to be making more videos soon showing you these old Victorian photographs. And it's almost like looking at a piece of history from days of long ago. So thanks for watching.